This is Dominique Beaumonte. You are listening to Season with Salt, the podcast. I'm your host, and this is episode 59.
Season with salt, with salt. Season with salt, with salt.
What's up? This is Dominique Beaumonte, and you are listening to Season with Salt, the podcast. I am elated to be back with you. Again, this is episode 59, y'all. Can you believe that it has been 59 episodes? We're in our fourth year of the podcast, and I just want to say, as always, how much I appreciate the fact that you take the time to listen to the podcast. I get really positive feedback ever so often. Folks share it, and I really appreciate it. I am, I guess, in living a characteristically unique life in that I'm a person who has been called by God to preach. And I, in addition to that reality, am a Black man, and I'm single, and I'm 40 years old. 10 years ago, Vernon came out with a book called, and I got this book right here with me, The 10 Rules of Dating. And at the time for which the book came out, I was the singles ministry president at my church. And I broke a lot of rules as the single ministry president. One in particular was that I was the only president of the singles ministry that did not become ineligible to be the president because of marriage. I did not get married, but I did not continue on as the president. At any rate, while I was president, we read this book. And the other day I was kind of going through my library and looking at books that I'd read down through the years. And I noticed that this was one of the books that I had a lot of tabs in. And I'm like, wow, I wonder how much of this book is relevant 10 years later. I think first I have to be a little bit vulnerable and honest about my dating life. I don't know if I don't know. I don't know if so I'm no expert. I'm not going to be able to tell you how to date, why to date, who to date. I have a very limited amount of experience when it comes to like dating apps and that kind of thing. I have a lot of experience with people, especially in the church environment, like kind of forcing you to like date. I've had, when I was a singles president, like I noticed, something that I heard from a lot of people was that they feel pressured to marry and to be in relationships, and that a lot of the pressure came from married people. And what I realized, especially in that season, is that a lot of the married people that were like pressuring singles to get married, and especially in the Christian realm, they were people that were unhappy in their marriage, or they had some questionable marriages that perhaps they were happy, but on the outside, people were questioning. And so, like, it kind of developed sort of this animosity in me because I would like respond very directly to people. I mean, I had my clapbacks ready when people would be like making comments around singleness and being, kind of derogatory or disrespectful towards people that are single. Um, so, like, I had developed a lot of perspective on just how to be actively single, and how to respond to people who question singleness. But I spent a lot of time like trying to like challenge people's perspectives on dating, but I didn't spend or extend that same amount of energy trying to like be somebody who dates. Um, my life changed, a couple of years ago. I was at working at the university, and a group of friends at the university were going to lunch and invited me to join. So we went to a restaurant, and to my surprise, everybody started talking about their dating life and how they were either exposed to people that they were dating, and where they were exposed at. One person in particular was at the table, and they were in the process of being uh, engaged. And I found it to be like interesting how they talked about their finding love on apps. And my first response was, wait a minute, like preachers can't be on Bumble and Plenty of Fish and Match.com. Like I started to think about some of the, you know, generic sort of responses to things that people are generally fearful of. So they start making up rules and stuff. And so I fell in that boat. I started making up rules like, oh no, we don't do that. Oh no, that's not, And one of the persons at the table, I will never forget this. He was like, well, you should just try it. Just try it for 30 days. If it doesn't work, then, you know, yes, you just don't. Anyway, so that however long that was, and I'm still on a few of the dating sites. So I did have some positive experiences, and I met some women that were very great people. And I don't regret those experiences. But there's just something strange for to me about like engaging in apps. Anyway, I don't want to get too deep in apps because that's not what this podcast episode is about. This is about a review, a 10-year review of the book 10 Rules of Dating by R.A. Vernon. So let me just pop off to you right now and say that I love this book just because I think that sometimes there are all these cliches and stigmas around dating, and really people inside of the church don't know how to teach about dating, right? Their perspectives on dating are really simple, like you're single, you single, and she's single, so you guys need to get married. And it's like, no, dating is this opportunity for people to find out more about themselves, what they care about, what they're passionate about, what they like in the opposite sex, and then the dating that I'm talking about, right? I'm not talking about everybody else's dating. I'm just talking about the dating that I'm talking about in context with this book. So if your definition of dating does not match, don't be writing no long review or trying to tell me off. I'm talking about my definition of dating on my podcast. Okay? Okay. So this is what Ari Vernon suggests, like in his book. He says that there are 3 types of singles. And he said through his research and counsel over the years, he had discovered that basically there are 3 types of singles: single and satisfied, single and sinning, and single and seeking. And I'm going to be honest with you, when I read this, I'm like, okay, not sinning, right? Could in my mind I'm open to seeking, but definitely not actively engaged in seeking, which probably tilts me beyond satisfied, because I know that when you're single, like especially if you know that there's a possibility and you see, especially I love kids, I'm around other people, all my friends are married, and so I'm not going to say that it never comes to mind, right? And so like this idea of being in covenant with somebody, it feels natural. It feels like something that's God ordained. And so when people get like really rowdy about like, oh, I don't want nobody, it's like, I think you're just overdoing it just a little bit, because I think deep inside, now maybe this person has been hurt. If you've been hurt through dating or through marriage, and you're like, hey, I want to wipe my hands clean, that I understand, right? But there should be some part of us that is vulnerable or open to the possibility, right? Even if it's just the possibility that God might, do something in the life of folks. But so that's how he kind of defines those stages. And is there some gray area in those? I don't know. But I had to think about, like, okay, where do I fall in that? Where do I want to fall in that? And where do I fall in that? And I think that kind of sometimes that is a good question. So he suggests that there are 10 rules of dating. Let me tell you what the rules are before I go into some key thoughts around some of the rules. Maybe he's written another book since then. I don't know, but I just appreciated this book. He suggests that rule number one is there must be physical attraction. Rule number two, they must love Jesus. Rule number three, there must be compatibility and connectivity. Rule number four, discuss each other's past. Rule number five, discuss children. Rule number six, talk about money. Some of these, I don't know if this is in order or not, but rule number seven, pace yourself, slow down. Rule number eight, engage or disengage. Rule number nine, go to counseling. And then rule number 10, do not touch. Okay, so let's start with rule number one. There must be physical attraction. I know that not everybody who listens to my podcast is deeply invested, involved in the church, but I'm talking about from my trajectory and my mindset and from my experience. And so I just want, if you are somebody that's married or if you are somebody that's hoping, maybe you're happily single and you're hoping that your daughter or your son gets married, let me tell you how important rule number one is. Because sometimes when people are happily married or single and satisfied or whatever that might look like, they don't take into consideration that there has to be physical attraction. Some people will project on you like this level of like loneliness, and like they will look at your age, or they will look at your place in life, and they will say, well, you just need to hurry up, or you need to, you're running out of time, you need to, he's single, you're single, like she's single, you're single, why don't you guys get together? Well, it puts us in a bad position, folks, when you try to hook me up with Sheila and I tell you that I'm not interested in Sheila, and then you ask me why. Hey, there must be physical attraction. And listen, don't position a single person to have to tell you why they're not interested in someone, because then it gets into kind of messiness, right? I don't want to have to explain to that why somebody and I've been in this situation, right? Like, so I'm nice, you're nice. Somebody's trying to hook us up. They're like, oh, you don't like such and such? And I say no, and they want to know why. And I have to find a way to say I'm not physically attracted to that person. And then it kind of gets messy because you don't have any negative feelings toward the person, but somebody is pushing you to label why you are not interested. If you're going to be like trying to connect folks, I think a good question to ask is, are you attracted to this person? Like, could you see yourself with this person? If the person says no, leave it alone. I cannot reiterate that enough. If the person is like, nah, I don't want to be like, just leave it alone, because 9 times out of 10, that's the first thing that a person is thinking. Not gonna be attracted to this person physically. And listen, we have the right to be attracted to somebody physically. Nobody wants to be stuck in a relationship with somebody that they do not see as physically attractive, or that somebody they love. What Ari Vernon does is he goes through a number of scriptures. He starts in Genesis and he talks about the ways that attraction shows up. And people will tell you how they fell in love first sight with their spouse, but then they will tell you, oh honey, you can grow to love that, you can get over that. They'll lose weight. I mean, you ain't a spring chicken either, or you got wrinkles on your eyes. Like, so what? I might have wrinkles under my eyes, I might not be physically attractive and I might want somebody that's more attractive than me. I might want somebody out of my league. That's my right to want. Let me just tell y'all. And so let people be physically attractive. And so Ari Vernon gives some tips. He's like, be your best self. And I appreciate that because as saints, we need that reminder because sometimes we're in the sort of these mundane sort of rotation of activities and we forget about the importance of dressing up and taking care of ourselves and creating great hygiene and all this kind of stuff because we are constantly in spaces where people are not looking at us as potentially somebody that they will want to be interested in. The reality is you never know where you're going to be when somebody is looking at you. You can be just taking a run around the corner to go to the store, and then you get to the store, and somebody that you are attracted to could be at the store in the front of the line, and you're like, oh wait, I just ran to the store and I didn't care about what I look like. And so Ari Vernon says, be your best self. He also notes that this on page 21, he says, since the majority of singles reading this book are probably Christians, let me answer the question for you that you all want to ask. What if they are not good in bed? Then he goes on to say, let me state emphatically, but I believe that premarital sex is wrong. The Bible, he goes over 1 Corinthians 6 and 18, and he talks about the importance of thinking. And he ends by saying that, like anything that the believer experiences, we have to walk by faith. And that walk by faith is inclusive of what our wedding might be like, because you can't get a little in our spiritual context before you get married. And so the I had a friend who was getting married, and he went to visit the pastor of his fiance. And he thought that he was going to be in trouble because he had spent, some questionable time with his fiance. And the pastor said, "Hey, you know what? I'm gonna be honest with you. Like, I'd rather you be in here, like telling me that you came close to crossing the line than telling me that you ain't never felt nothing." Like, I think that we do need that reminder that sexual attraction is healthy, right? Like that it is okay to see someone as sexually attractive. It's okay to want somebody. But there's a difference between falling into temptation and just, like there's a difference between falling into temptation and just going to bed with somebody. And so I appreciate this idea of like sexual attractiveness. Um, you need to have that in order for the relationship to be sustained, and I think that that's important too. And one of the things I've learned in my dating life, in particular, is that, like, especially as somebody who loves the Lord, who goes to church, who has a trajectory of a preacher, I like a lot of people, like, they will line you up something that they see physically, some type of physical presentation, like, oh, well, such and such is a good speaker, or, such and such is a good, she would make a good preacher's wife. And it's just like, yeah, but you are looking at what they present at church. When you mature, like, and you start, and I'm not talking even about spiritual maturity. I'm talking about just natural maturity. There's some stuff, like when I'm looking at the compatibility between me and a woman, I'm not thinking about, like, can she preach or can she sing a sermonic solo. I'm thinking about, like, other needs that I have in life that would equate to compatibility, that go beyond the person's capability, like, while they're at church, right? Like, just half the stuff that we do at church is because we learned how to do it, right? But I'm thinking about, how I'm compatible with a person, beyond their gifts and talents in the public arena. And so I love the idea of them being attractive. His second rule was they must love Jesus. And I think that goes without saying. And I think these days and times, like, we want to make people love Jesus, and we want to, like, kind of, say, hey, they'll come around. What R.A. Vernon provides is a couple of warning signs. So some of the warning signs that he mentions, Matthew's language is not reflective of someone who represents Christ. In addition, call me old-fashioned, but a brother who approaches a woman and uses profanity in his pickup line is not worth further conversation. He does not respect you. So he goes over some other warning signs that folks should be looking for when it comes to loving Jesus. And really, I would just say that loving Jesus is really defined by your level of maturity in Christ, right? So if you're a new Christian, loving Jesus might simply be that they are enrolled or on the roll at somebody's church. But as you mature in Christ, loving Jesus is they have accepted the will of God. They walk in faith and not by sight. They are somebody who has a prayer life that is independent of yours, so that when you need to ask God, or when you get in a difficult situation in your relationship, both of you have a time that you spent with the Lord where you can go to the throne of grace for yourself. And then so in the Bible, it talks about a two-stranded cord being stronger, right? And so there's nothing like, and that's not to say that everybody that you date will be on the same level of maturity. You might be dating somebody whose spiritual context is different from yours. I am Pentecostal through and through. I'm one of the folks that come from a denomination that folks will call holy rollers, and so naturally, I have a very conservative perspective on a lot of different things that I really won't know until I become intimately involved with somebody, and they're like, that's. And so there might be some things like, for instance, my perspective on church attendance is completely built out. Actually, it's built in being single, because the Bible informs us that singles need to be caring for the work of the ministry, right? And so because we don't have a spouse, so our work in the ministry is at church, right? And so my perspective on going to church is, I go whenever the doors are open. Is that realistic for somebody that is in a relationship? And so just because I go to church all the time doesn't necessarily mean that it doesn't have anything to do with my level of spiritual maturity. It just means I go because I feel like that's what I'm supposed to do as a person that's single. And so that could easily change, because when I get married, I have more responsibility. The Bible says that my household becomes my priority. And so we learn to love Christ together. And so your levels of relationship with Christ are going to be different. You may or may not be productive. It might you have to weigh what that means, and a lot of it has to do with the way that people are willing to make compromise in their own life. And if we make a compromise in our relationship that honors God, then we can grow closer to God together. Right. And so even if I'm a ordained minister and you are just a regular person that sits on the back row, we begin to define together what that relationship with Christ looks like as a unit. And then through our definition, and so that might mean that we don't go to every service, because there are going to be some times when we need to spend time with each other. We need to spend time at home, or we need to go on a date night, or whatever that means. That's going to be purely defined on how the relationship is developed. And so I think it's important, according to Harry Vernon, to make sure that you are establishing together a relationship with Christ. Rule 3 is there must be connectivity and compatibility. This is very similar to rule number 1 about sexual compatibility, but this is more about, how you see each other. He talks about the ability to have conversation and to talk and to flow. the loyalty that is expressed within the relationship, whether a person is easy to talk to, are they a ride or die? Are there somebody that you can depend on when the going gets tough? Like, what's their tenacity like? What is there? And some stuff is like, you, especially if you've been single for a long time. I'm 40 years old. And so I can't date somebody that has nothing in common with me. If we have nothing in common, then it's like we're living in two different worlds. Now, I know that there's compromise where, like, I teach you, I engage you in things that I'm interested in, and you engage me in things that I'm interested in, and then we develop things that we're both interested in, and it's like, bam. But the reality is as you get older, like, you become set in your ways. And there's some stuff that I really like to do, but I really like to do it because I don't have to do it with other people. Right. And so compatibility is just, and connectivity means, like, is there such a connectivity that there are things that we both enjoy and that we both have in common? And what I'm learning in this season is that thing that we both have in common can't necessarily just be church. Okay, churches are closed now, right? And you don't want to build a relationship that is built on something external, right? Like, if you like to do puzzles, then that's great, because you can do puzzles. You can buy a puzzle and take it somewhere. You can do puzzles at home. You can't do puzzles at church, right? But you need to have things that are not based on other systems. I think that's one of the reasons why there are a lot of relationships that are in turmoil these days, because people are their relationships, the success of their relationships were completely built on external things, and when they had to just be at home, like in one environment, that it became very difficult for them to just be around each other all the time, because the things that they use as a crutch were no longer there for them. So they had to learn how to they're learning how to survive, or they're not learning how to survive. And so, you know I think that that's important. Rule number 4, Ari Vernon says that you need to discuss each other's past. And I think that this is a difficult one, right? Because ideally, you want to move forward, right? Like, when you are pursuing a new relationship, like, you want to move past the past. But we know that history is one of the greatest teachers, right? We know that history tells us a lot. And so we need to know about a person's past, not just about, like, their previous relationships, but about their upbringing, like, who raised them, what values were instilled in them when they were raised. Like, did they have both parents? Did they have daddy issues? Did they have mom issues? Were they raised in environments that were clean? What's their perspective on cleaning? How do they care for the home that they live in? You want to discuss, according to our event, what are their eating habits? What are their expectations for the kitchen? You want to meet their parents. You want to get a good idea of how their parents work together, whether it's they're divorced or they don't. You want to get some good intent on what generational characteristics were passed down that are important to know about the person that you are interested in. You want to know about the things that that bother them, their pet peeves, the things that they think about, the things that they don't think about, the things that they avoid. How strong is their relationship with their siblings? Where have they worked? Why did they quit? Where did they go? What's the longest thing that they've ever done that is consistent, right? And so there are a lot of things to be thinking about when you're talking about a person's past, because, like I said, a person's past can tell you a lot about them. Discussing children. Okay, this is where I had a lot of notes. Page 66 talks about discussing children. It says, if you're the type of person who doesn't want to deal with a child you did not make, You are not selfish. I love that because, especially in this day and time, especially depending on how old you are, like it's almost very difficult to find someone today who doesn't have a child, right? Or there are a lot of people who are re entering into the dating game who were divorced. So when you love someone, you have to love what they bring to the relationship, right? So you accumulate things over time, and then when you become one with somebody else, you either in your process to become one, shed those things, or though the other person that you are with learns to embrace that. What if it is a child? What if it is a family? What if it is a disabled mother or father? You bring those things into the relationship. And so that doing that is a decision. I'm watching Love and Marriage Huntsville, and one of the couples on that show, in the event that you haven't watched it, has a child, a young man who is growing into manhood, and the man who is recently married to someone who is his second wife, and he is her second husband. And both of them have children from a previous relationship, and they're going through the process of full adoption of the husband's son from a previous marriage. And there are all of these things that they likely had to do to develop a strong relationship, not just between the husband and wife, but between the children that are involved, so that those children are comfortable in those situations. And I'm sure that for folks that have kids, like loving their kids or not loving them is a deal breaker. And so when you want to know, when you're having a conversation with someone, especially if they're a parent, like what their perspective is on children, especially raising other people's children. If you have any friends who are of a mixed family, you can probably ask them some questions about, especially if they have children together and they have children that they don't have together. You can probably ask them questions about the difficulty of navigating relationships with a child that is yours by marriage, but not yours, not your seed, not somebody that you are responsible for bringing on into the earth. And that can be that can be difficult because maybe those children will experience favoritism from the step parent. That can be very difficult. And so it's not just deciding to embrace that child, it's deciding to embrace them as yours, and not to create any like ill feelings or traumatic relationships that can kind of bite you in the butt. Ari Vernon talks about how he wants to write a book about raising someone else's child, a divine assignment. Raising someone's child is a divine assignment. You have to be called to that. Loving their parent is not enough, right? Because that person has to feel that you as an adult love and embrace them. And how many times have you seen those movies where like the kids don't feel like the parents really care about them? Um, on page 69, I underlined this. It says, don't let the person you're dating anywhere near your child until you're certain that God's hand is at work. And I think that that's really important. Like, you don't want to expose your child to somebody that you don't think you're going to be in a relationship with. You don't want your house, you don't want any space that you occupy to be a revolving door or a carousel of men or women who are exposed to your children, because then your children become confused. And in the long term, that can have some really negative impacts, right? He also talks about having a conversation around how many children that somebody wants to have. On page 71, he asks a question, a great question for you to ask your potential new spouse is, how many kids do you want to have? Don't minimize the question, is the admonition that he gives, because some people, it's kind of funny. Whenever I hear men talking about how they want like a lot of kids, and the woman is like, the woman is thinking about what having a lot of kids means for her body. And the man is, because he doesn't have that challenge, is probably thinking about what having a lot of kids means for his ego, right? And so you have to come to some, some middle ground on what what having 6 kids means for everybody. So you're thinking about when to meet the kids, whether both of you want to have kids, what you do if one person doesn't want to have kids, the other one has or does. And then what if my kids don't like my spouse? What if they're not into the person that I am with? So those are things that have to be considered in relationship. Rule number 6: talk about money. Like, I don't know why this makes me uncomfortable, but it just does. I think it doesn't make me uncomfortable. I shouldn't say that. A part of my challenge is that I hear a lot of like people my age like talking about money as a deal breaker, and uh, it's not that I think it's an area that people should settle, because I know married couples that struggle because their perspectives on having money and spending money and making money never married each other. They just have 2 different ways of thinking about it, just based on their upbringing. But I think that sometimes like people can take this part too seriously. I think sometimes people have a fear of putting themselves out there or dating because they are like overly concerned about what they could potentially bring into the marriage, or they get uncomfortable around commitment because they don't want to go through the process of like people finding out what they have and what they don't have. I think that we also put this emphasis on like what somebody's credit score is, and we don't want somebody else's. We think our credit score is insignificant or corrupted, and we don't feel like we're good enough for other people because of this area, or like don't. We're very confident in this area, and confident to the point where maybe other people are uncomfortable or don't want to, communicate with us. Also, I think sometimes like credit scores and money and stuff like that, like speak to status and, class and a lot of different issues that make people uncomfortable. And some people are like perfectly comfortable with like certain lifestyles that don't center around the advancement through money, and other people are like, nah, I don't want to be in the same place that I'm in now, 40 years ago. This is what Ari Vernon says on page 74. He says, believing that your money issues or concerns will just work themselves out is a gross misconception assumed by many. In reality, however, finances do not just work themselves out. In all probability, without a solid plan for how you will handle money, financial troubles will likely arise. In fact, these troubles tend to increase when not handled aggressively and appropriately. You both can save yourselves years of pain and stress by engaging in candid conversations regarding your views, beliefs, thoughts, and plans concerning this important topic. I don't think you can talk about this enough. And it's not just about how much money you have, it's about your philosophy on how money should be gathered, how money should be saved, and how money should be used, right? Um, it does. There also, for me, has to be room for a couple to reimagine these things and to give each other grace, right? Uh, if I'm 40 years old and we get together, like sometimes I just go to the mall and I just buy things. And I can do that because I know the lifestyle that I built. I know how much money I'm bringing in. I know how much money I got. And my money, with my money, I'm not responsible for any other person except myself. And so I know what I'm spending and why I'm spending it and what I have. When I become one with somebody else, or when I'm in a covenant relationship with somebody else, My, me, what I got is not always going to work. Now, I understand that over time there are some relationships where people decide, like, hey, my money is my money and your money is your money, and we have a joint account and we transfer this amount of money in this account, and that's how we pay the bills and keep things afloat. But that's the result. That's the product of communication and relationship and development that happens over time and through communication. So it's very important for people to be having those conversations. And so Ari Vernon says, show each other the money, right? Show up and have that conversation. Understand each other's credit. Understand not just what each other's credit score is, but what necessarily do you all need to support each other, and what do you want, right? Somebody might have filed bankruptcy, but it might be the result of a previous divorce, or something that you need to talk about. Talking about somebody's credit score is important because if you marry someone, once you marry them and your credit score becomes their credit score and you have a bad credit score, there's some things you would not be able to do as a unit, whether it be buy a house or buy a car, or saving or having a credit card can be very difficult if your credit is living on both sides of the spectrum in a relationship. You also need to be looking at debt. When you get married, what debt are you incurring from that other person? Like, what do they have, already? I think that the important thing, though, that Ari Vernon hits on is reviewing the history is the beginning, but it's not the whole picture, right? And so he says, what is the plan? Before you say I do, sit down with your partner and create a realistic financial plan for your joint future. And he jotted down a few thoughts in order to point the reader in the right direction. He said, make sure that you know the full extent of each other's financial situation. And after you've established that, number two, he says, wipe out as much debt as you can before you get married. Don't accumulate new debt attempting to pay for a wedding. Decide who will work and settle on it. Live within your means. Don't overdo it, right? Um, buy everything with cash as much as you can. Save as much as you can. Create a 5-year financial goal. Help those that are in need. And then he finishes off by saying, tithe in the church that you believe in. Those are good principles and practices for engaging in a healthy financial relationship. Rule number 7, right, says that you need to slow down, right? I think sometimes when we're in a relationship, especially depending on how old we are, we get pressured to like move very quickly in relationships because we want to accomplish the things that we see our peers accomplishing, whether it be joint business ventures or kids or, a happy and healthy sex life. We want to get the things that other people have. And so we rush ourselves into systems and find out that it ain't really all like that. And some folks that we wanting to emulate or that we're dreaming about or following, they don't necessarily have the capacity to that what they're selling is not realistic, rather. And so here's what he says on page 90. He says, things could not be any better right now. The birds are singing, the weather is beautiful, and you're walking around smiling, skipping, and whistling. I would argue that with the exception of a true conversion to Christ experience, the feeling that no human feeling can replace, I'm talking about the spirit-filled experiencing his presence and at work. There's no greater feeling than the initial feeling of a romantic love. What you feel on the inside can only be described accurately by someone currently experiencing it. Those of us that have moved from the initial love to a long-lasting, proven, abiding love, held together by our Christ and his word, would not trade it for anything. But that does not take away from the warm, crazy, can't sleep, on the phone for 6 hours, every song matters, every song reminds you of that person love that you experienced initially. And so, you want to I think taking relationships slow is very important because you want to have those moments. Like you want to create history in your life, right? You want to create moments where you can look back on them and you weren't rushing or eager to do things. I think also the longer the time that you take to get to know each other, the better you can plan for your life, right? Um, and so um, he talks about taking a time out when needed. He talks about like creating space in relationships so that for a fact that the relationship is going to work. Rule number 8 is engage or discipline or disengage. That's the space and time where you have to make some decisions. Page 102 says there comes a point in the Christian dating when you have to decide if you and the person you're with are going to get engaged. Okay, I'll say it again. There is only one reason a Christian should be dating. Christians date to get married. We don't play date. And so that's one of the things that the church has taught for many, many years, that Christians date to marry. We don't date casually. We date for the purpose of marrying. And what this should mean is that early on, if you realize that there is no possibility or no potential for compatibility, then you don't extend yourself beyond the time for which you realize, hey, this is not going to work. Um, I want to read a little bit about what he says about this. He talks about Exodus 20. He says that in Exodus 20, God gave his people 10 commandments through his main man, Moses. I've taken the liberty, Vernon, of giving you all the single ladies reading this, what I call the 10 demandments. As saved single women, you must demand certain things from yourself and any man you seriously dating. I understand that before this book, the word demandments didn't exist, but it does now. The 10 demandments for all the single ladies. I'm going to read them. Number 1, demand yourself to love and trust God more than any man. Number 2, demand yourself to pray as well as read your Bible consistently. Number 3, demand yourself to desire the filling of the Holy Ghost more than sex. Okay. Number 4, demand yourself to go to a teaching church weekly. Be active in ministry that you are called to. I don't know why this stuff is for the woman, but this is for everybody so far. Number 5, demand that any man that approaches you knows or is willing to know Jesus in an intimate way. Number 6, demand that any man you date honors the God in you and treats you like the kingdom woman that you are at all times. Number 7, demand yourself to never allow any man to hit you and still have you. Number 8, demand that any man you're considering marrying get as healthy as possible in every way before you say I do. Number 9, demand of yourself that you never settle for any man that God did not send. So that's work. Whether never any woman that God does not send for the men. And then finally, demand that from this moment on, no man will ever have sex with you unless he is your husband. So those are the demandments from R.A. Vernon that I think should apply to all of us. Number 9, he says, go to counseling. We don't need to be afraid as Christians to go to counseling. We need to get counseling early and often. We need to get counseling. We need pastoral counseling. We need financial counseling. We need mental counseling. Any counseling that we can get, but use those benefits at your job. Use the free community benefits. Take advantage of any counseling that you can get, because the more healthier you are, the more healthier your relationship is, the longer it will last, right? And so make sure that you are as healthy as possible and that you are pursuing a healthy relationship and exhaust all opportunities, right? Take advantage of every opportunity that you can to create a healthy relationship. And these rules, and many of them, it doesn't matter how far along you are. Some of them you can go backwards. I know you've been together for 5 years. It's still not late to go over, how that person was raised and some of the things that might impact your pending and your future marriage. The 10 and final rule that Dr. Vernon provides for us is don't touch. This is all about sex. And this really has to be your conviction, right? You have to decide that this matters. You have to decide that being consistent, being celibate, you have to decide the importance of this. You have to decide that this is a way that you are going to honor your body. Nobody else can put this on you. Nobody else can make this something that you do. And if you don't understand this from the biblical perspective, people will manipulate you. And so you don't want to just be abstaining from marriage because your pastor said or because somebody told you that it was the right thing to do. I think it's important for couples to have a clear and concise understanding of why they are abstaining and what it means to God. And that comes really through counseling, right? Like asking the right questions, sitting at the feet of a spiritual leader or advisor and asking them what is necessary. And you want to make sure that before you even sit at these folks' feet, that they align with the value set that you already have, especially if you're not being counseled by somebody that you identify with as your spiritual leader or your pastor. And so these are a lot of things. Some of them, like, they seem to be really basic, but I think that all of us know people who skip so many of these steps because they were just so eager to be in love, and it kind of came back to bite them. And so what R.A. Vernon is essentially saying in this book is take every proactive step that you can to ensure that your love is long lasting. And don't cut any corners. Don't try to make something that is not something that you want it to be. Be wise in the way that you think about relationships. Um, don't have so many rules in your life that you count people out, but be realistic about what it means to be in a covenant relationship with someone for a lifetime. That includes how you think about finances, how you would raise a child, how you experience Christ. All those are really, really, really important to life. And if we don't think about those beforehand, then we go into relationships with people and their lack of understanding or the fact that we haven't had this conversation as a unit, it impacts the way that we experience the world. Because if you're unhappy at home, it's very difficult to be happy everywhere else that you go. And so I would encourage you. I don't know if Dr. Vernon has other books, but you can look up any of his work on YouTube to see things that he is preaching about. I am in no way an expert. This was a book review. But I hope hopefully something was said that was helpful to you. I know this is one of my longer podcasts, but I think that it's such a cliche topic that church people don't talk about enough. And I think that the more we talk about it, the more we are empowered, the more that we make better decisions. And I think that as Christians, we want to be making decisions that people can look on and be proud of and emulate, right? I know it's hard to sometimes be the guinea pig or be the person responsible for modeling for everybody, but we have such a biblical framework that positions us to be role models, right? And so we want to be as best as we can um, available for God's use and for God to demonstrate his love through us. And that means that we are walking demonstrations of his love by the way that we love other people, and the word says that. So hopefully something was said that you find to be valuable. This is not normally things that I would podcast about, but I came across this book and I'm like, gotta talk about this. So thank you very much, and I look forward to having future conversations with you. If you find this to be helpful, please, please, please share it with your contacts. I really appreciate that. I also want to say that if there are other books related to dating that really speak to the African American framework and the Christian values, I'd love to know more about what books you're reading that you think would be valuable.
Season whistle, whistle. Season whistle, whistle.